I had such a good weekend with my fellow returning citizens, and I wanted to highlight another one of the conversations. It was just part of that weekend. It was part of the laughter and the joy and the processing and the experiencing.
When I was inside, I used to have dreams like a normal person, like I mean, like at night when you sleep, and then after, I don't know, at some point during prison, I stopped having dreams, and I still don't have dreams except for when I have nightmares about prison. It has been 10 years, and the only dreams I have are nightmares about prison.
Yes.
What do people dream about?
Yeah, every night. It's always a situation where you're back in prison. Some of the situations that you might have witnessed, or some of the things that you had to have done. Those are the constant themes that are going through. Honestly, for me, maybe I'm not speaking for everybody. My biggest fear, a lot of people's biggest fear, is dying. My biggest fear is going back.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. There's
Totally.
not enough
Totally.
money you can pay me.
Yep.
There is nothing. That is my biggest fear. So almost every night, you're reliving that experience over and over. And then when you wake up, you're like, okay, I'm free. So
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
I still wake up with like a racing heart, and it has been. I thought it would go away. It's been 10 fucking years.
Yeah.
You know?
And those are the only dreams you have.
Yes, I don't have any other dreams. They are all prison dreams.
Okay, so when I have those dreams though, I'm not back in prison. I'm in jail and I have new charges, but nobody will tell me what they are, and I don't know what I did. And that is like, I had that so bad like 3 nights ago, and it just haunts me for the entire rest of the day, because you know you're back, but you don't even know how it happened. So is it like that for you when you're back?
It was kind of situation like I will see like, okay, I got like you're doing another 40 months, 50 months, 60 months. I'm okay for what? For what? So I'm running around trying to get on the phone, and this is all in a dream, mind you. You're scrambling. What's going on? What am I doing? And then it's like you're gonna break down, and then by the time you're gonna break down and freak out, you're waking up, and then you're thinking about that all day. Like, okay, am I gonna do something? Is something going on? So.
Do you think that's because of what we do, though? Do you think, like, I spend a lot of time talking to prisoners and being in prisons, and you spend a lot of time talking about prison, and you do the same as I do. Like, do you think that's why? Does everyone who did time have this, or is it worse for us because we're in it?
I mean, I have it.
So many of y'all.
You just got out, though, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys tell
I mean, it's
us,
been
is
10
that-
years for me. Like,
is
why the
it-
fuck
Yeah,
is this
it's
still
been
happening?
4 years.
Because
You're
that's
out there so often,
terrible.
or
I mean,
are you
that
guys
sticks
like
with
the
you.
worst
That
possible
that
situation?
feeling.
Dreams that you're
The
still
feeling when you were
incarcerated, that you're
in
gonna get
the
locked up again,
county
you have
jail, like
charges
getting
pending. That's
sentenced
my-
and going
my
into
dreams
prison,
are, I
like
have charges pending.
you'll never
I have
forget that,
charges
man.
pending.
You,
I'm
that,
waiting,
that,
I'm waiting.
that-
That
it's terrible.
anxiety
And
that
like
was
that's
Yeah.
the scary. Like
That's-
I'll have a
So
dream that
y'all
I'm
tell
going to
me,
my probation
are y'all
office, and
feeling
they're like,
that? Is that
"Oh
what's
no,
going on
you're
with y'all
like,
too?
oh look what we found," and
Right.
My
it's just like, and then it feels real because it's kind of real.
Well, I want to link that because I have some close people that I know that were veterans, and they don't talk about their military experience. They don't talk about it at all, but they're constantly getting those nightmares and night terrors. So for me, my belief is not because we're talking about it, we have a whole life, but it's a traumatic experience. So when you go through a traumatic experience, you're going to have some type of trauma after the fact.
And
So
that's what they're saying too. That's exactly what they're saying. Yes, I do that. Yes, my husband feels that same way. Yes, the nightmares are real. Yeah, my husband has severe PTSD from prison, and they're not on a platform where they're talking about it. And I think, and y'all tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that people, not only if you don't have like a public platform, you don't really talk about prison a lot, right? In the free world. I mean, if you're with your family, we're not talking about, I'm hanging out with my mom and dad, I'm not talking about prison, right? And so I'm assuming that I don't know, that helps me. You guys are part of my recovery, part of my therapy.
That's what you're
from
saying.
prison.
You asked if we have those dreams because of that. Like
No,
I've
I
found
mean,
this
are
incredibly
they
healing.
worse? I meant, are they
Okay.
worse? Because I know everyone's gonna have them some. I just wonder if working around it all the time is worse, and I don't know if that's different. Like, because
You're in the worst of the
I'm
situations.
going to
You're
prison.
in the trenches,
yeah,
for real.
and I'm
Yeah.
like constantly talking to guys that are calling me from fucking AdSeg on their contraband phones and shit.
Yeah.
There's like I'm talking to people that are in the worst of it.
And
Like,
interviewing
Well,
death row
yeah,
inmates.
yeah.
That
That's traumatizing.
yes,
like
that's-
forget
I
your
think
experience
the
aside.
worst one was there was a guy that killed himself in the Harris County Jail, and I've talked about this before. And I wrote a short thing about how this had happened, and I noticed that he was in solitary. Like they said, he was in a private cell, and I called that spokesman. And I was like, "You fucker, that's not a private
That's the
cell.
shoe,
That's
that's the
fucking
hole."
solitary." He was
Yeah.
in fucking solitary, and he was like, "Yeah, you got me. You're right." But I was like, he had just been put in solitary, and I was like, I get that moment when you've just been put in solitary and you're trying to figure out how to kill yourself, but he did it. And then a few days later, I got a letter from him that it was
wow.
his 15-page suicide note, and he'd written it over the course of like 4 months, and it was like he'd start off telling his life story and then be like, you know, he's like, I want to die, but here's my life story. And then he'd stop and be like, you know what, I'm good. And he'd put it down for a few weeks, and he'd pick it back up a few weeks later and be like, okay, I'm going to do this, and like keep writing again. And then when he actually did, it was because he was fighting with his wife, and he was calling her all the time. And like she still loved him. Like they were not on like bad terms per se, but the prosecutor was like, do you want him to stop calling you? And she was like, that would be nice. So the prosecutor went to court, and the judge was like, oh, I'll put on a no call order that he can't call. The only way the jail could figure out to enforce that was to put him in solitary instead of just cutting off like phone coverages. They were like, we can't enforce this, so they just put him in solitary. And then he like lost it and killed himself. And I wrote a story about it, about how this, you know, illustrates, like I told their whole love story and their narrative, and like how this illustrates the gaps in mental health care and suicide prevention in Texas prisons, because this was after Sandra Bland. And the Sandra Bland Act really only increased mental health care in the beginning. And if you're 4 months in, it didn't do shit. It was only making sure you don't kill yourself the first like 3 days, right? So this was 4 months in, and I wrote about how like, cool, Sandra Bland Act did these things, did nothing for most people.
Can we talk about that? Can we talk about suicidal thoughts?